Hello, hello. And you're right. I haven't worked for Eric for Attorney General Holder, for 10 years, but I still call him boss.
Yes.
When I talk to him.
I think we settled on Your Highness. I'm like, I don't even know the honorific, Mr. Attorney General, Your Excellency, Highness.
That's a bridge too far for me, Your Highness, Your Excellency. I'll stick with boss. I know him too well for that one.
He was fantastic. He also name dropped. He said, I've known Merrick Garland for however many years. I'm like, next thing is you're going to say you're friends with President Obama. Whatever. Oh, you are? Okay. But you asked off air, what did he say about, because that's obviously was my question, is his take, because obviously there's been some frustration with Merrick Garland. He said he was heartened, certainly by the latest, DOJ moves. Is that what he said to you privately? His Highness?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly the same. More or less.
Well,
a little less colorful.
I mean, you've said it. You've been on this on Twitter, Matt. You've said, in the last week, Merrick Garland's DOJ has indicted Trump's inaugural chair, told Trump DOJ appointees they couldn't hide behind privileges to avoid testifying about January 6th, and refused to block this lawsuit against Brooks. And you further said, I don't believe those three are related, or the AG made the decisions he did because they were right ones politically, but because perhaps it's a sign the early consensus about him was not completely accurate.
Yeah. I mean, look, the point I was trying to make here, there are a couple ways you could look at these three decisions he made. One is he made some moves that were very unpopular early on. The filing in the Jean Carroll case, refusal to release an OLC memo that Bill Barr had relied on that pissed a lot of people off. And you could interpret what he's done last week by saying, well, we went too far leaning one direction, and so we have to swing back the other direction. And I don't think that's what happened. I think kind of they made all these decisions on the merits. Certainly it's not what happened in the indictment of Thom Barrack, right? I don't believe they would indict someone just because they were under political pressure from the left. I think, but I do think the idea that Merrick Garland was going to come in and be this apologist for the last administration, I think is very much disproven by the events that happened last week. I think what it shows is he's going to take things as they come. And sometimes we're not going to like that. Sometimes we're not going to like it for reasons that aren't really fair. Like, he won't indict people that we want to be indicted, and it will be because DOJ just can't support a case. And sometimes we're not going to like the decisions and I think it's fair for us to criticize him. I still think the refusal to release that OLC opinion was a big mistake, and he should have done it. They disagreed. It's fair to criticize him, and we can agree to disagree. I think.
Well, by the way, speaking of Barrack, you said the amount of ickiness between the UAE and the Trump administration was always overshadowed by the Russia investigation, but the full details of the Elliot Broidy, George Nader, Thom Barrack episode will rank up there as one of the worst, the all-time worst Washington corruption stories. Now, ickiness, a legal term?
Yeah, very much so. You can get indicted for that. Ickiness in the first degree.
No, I mean, as I said the morning this one broke, I said, did anybody work for the United States of America in this Trump administration, right?
Yeah, well, especially, I mean, look, remember when Trump got elected, or even back during the campaign, he had all these crooks and grifters and hacks like Steve Bannon, who turned out also to be a crook, but at the time we didn't know that.
Coincidentally, yes.
Yeah, that's right. And Thom Barrack was supposed to be the respectable businessman, very accomplished businessman, very successful, and it turns out he was a crook too, and not only a crook, but someone, if you believe DOJ, selling out his own country for a foreign government.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, now we move to January 6th. You also tweeted a really important move by DOJ to start walking back the previous administration's overly broad executive privilege claims. Keep it coming. Because stuff like this. So this was Bannon back, right? This is before, Travis, January 6th.
This is the morning of January 6th.
Yes, okay.
Today's just not a rally. The president's going to give you his opening argument.
Yeah. Okay. And he went on to say,
at 1 o'clock that starts, and there's going to be some pretty controversial things going on.
Yeah. So Okay, here, who tweeted this? Keith tweeted, Representative Mo Brooks had body armor on. Roger Stone had Proud Boys as security. 45 was in charge of the National Guard in D.C., and he was watching TV and tweeting. Bannon announcing craziness for 1-6 on his podcast 1-5. Flynn's brother is at the Pentagon. I'm no Jessica Fletcher, but seriously? He went on to say, how about these visitors at Boebert and Green were waltzing around the Capitol on 1-5? The protest for those political prisoners at the DOJ with Gates and Brooks, this was yesterday, right? Now their distraction with storming the Senate about masks. I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but it's not adding up. I mean, that it is a lot of, I mean, clearly it looks like planning, funding, accessories to everything that happened. Are you confident they will get to that? The early signals sound good. They don't sound subpoena shy, and they don't. I mean, it sounds like Raskin and others are saying we're going all the way to the top, right?
I think they have a good chance. I think there's another important step DOJ could take to help. I think the decision they made that you referenced my tweet regarding to tell former DOJ officials that you can't rely on executive privilege or attorney-client privilege or other privileges that the government holds to avoid a subpoena. If you get a subpoena, you need to go testify. I think that was important. That was actually, I think, far more important than the Mo Brooks decision because it's a clear signal that DOJ will not stand in the way of the Hill committees, at least trying to get access to DOJ officials. And I hope when it comes up, they'll say the same thing with respect to officials in the White House and other places in the government. All that does, though, is remove all of these potential witnesses' ability to say, well, we can't. We would come testify but DOJ won't let us. It doesn't mean that they will come testify, right? It removes one roadblock. And so we get back into this position where, if someone wants to defy a subpoena from Congress doesn't have a great way to enforce that. DOJ ultimately has to be, Congress can hold them in contempt, refer to DOJ. DOJ criminally prosecutes them for contempt of court. I would like to see the Justice Department send a very clear signal, maybe write a letter to Chairman Thompson of the January 6th committee, maybe the Speaker, maybe make a public statement for the Attorney General himself that says, all of these witnesses from the executive branch who have said don't have a reliable privilege to stand on to avoid testifying, if we get a referral of contempt for Congress, we're going to criminally prosecute it. We're not going to look the way administrations have in the past. You are on notice. You will be criminally prosecuted for ignoring these subpoenas. And I think that would put the fear of God in a lot of these witnesses that they can't blow off the Hill the way they have, the way they did for 4 years.
Yeah, of course. Well, I wanted to get your take on this Reuters piece. U.S. refusal to defend lawmaker in Capitol riot, a signal to Trump. They're talking about referring to the Mo Brooks thing. The Department of Justice refusal to defend a Republican congressman accused in a civil lawsuit of helping incite the attack. Could hamper Trump's legal defense in the same case, experts said. The department said Tuesday told a federal judge it had declined a request by Mo Brooks to grant him immunity by covering him under the Westfall Act, which shields federal employees from being sued for their words or actions in the course of their employment. They've ruled rightly this is not in the course of his employment to incite a riot or incite an insurrection, So experts said the move appeared to send a message to Trump, a co-defendant in the case, ruling out immunity when it warned that inciting an attack on Congress is not within the scope of employment of a representative or any federal employee. Also, what they'd be saying, Matt, is not in the scope of Trump has nothing to do with, right, certification of the vote or any of that, right? So anyway, a senior Justice Department official said the government's finding sends a clear message. No leader in our government is acting within the scope of his employment when he acts to subvert a free and fair election by getting people to go up and riot and interfere. The leaders who perpetrated these tragedies are personally responsible for their actions. Do you think that's true in this specific case?
I do, and it was really telling that DOJ put that line in the filing and then went around making that clear to reporters, because they had technically kind of avoided the question with respect to Mo Brooks. He sort of did this idiotic thing in a filing in a case where he said, I was there as part of a campaign event. I was talking in a partisan fashion by talking about the next election. And so he kind of gave DOJ an out where they didn't really have to decide the question of whether his remarks were covered because he wasn't there as an official member of Congress. He was there as a candidate. Of course, no candidate's remarks are covered by can be attributed to the United States of America. But they went ahead and decided that question anyway, right? They said he can't be covered because he was there as a candidate. But in case the point is not clear, we're going to make clear, even if you were there as an official member of Congress or any other federal government official, that doesn't count. That's outside the bounds of the West Block. Now, I would argue that, denying a rape accusation in the case of Jean Carroll ought to fall within that same standards, and they shouldn't have intervened for Trump. But be that as it may, I think that was a pretty clear message to the president that we're not going to let you off the hook here. You have to yourself in this case.
Okay. Well, just one more tweet I wanted to run past because I think it really goes to your point about the DOJ. Luke tweeted, "We're living in an endless cycle of Republican abuse of power and obstruction of justice that has seen 2 impeachments and an ongoing insurrection so far. There is no end, no bottom. They simply will not comply with the imperatives of government or institutions of justice." I mean, that's really where we are. That's what we have to reclaim, right? One way or another.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's absolutely right. Our ability to reclaim it, I'm just not so sure I have any confidence in. We have the ability to reclaim it when Democrats are in power, but I think the Republican Party hasn't. I mean, look, it's not some brilliant observation. The Republican Party has changed, but I think one of the ramifications of that is this idea that has been a bipartisan consensus that the Department of Justice acts independently of the White House and doesn't go around trying to prosecute the president's political opponents and let his cronies off the hook. I think that consensus is dead. I don't think any Republican really believes in it. Now, they will believe in it when a Democrat's in power, right? They'll get all high and mighty, and you'll hear Ted Cruz and others fulminating about abuse of power at the Department of Justice. But I think forget about Donald Trump. The next establishment Republican president, whoever he or she is, well, of course it'll be a he, they're not going to, I don't think we're going back to a Department of Justice that behaves the way it does under Merrick Garland or the way it had under, Eric Holder. Like Bill Barr or Attorney General Josh Hawley or something, they're all going to behave that way, I think, now in the Republican Party.
I mean, that's exactly what I said
to
your
scary,
former
right?
boss,
Mr.
Attorney General, Excellency Highness. Okay. What did we decided on Your Highness?
Yes.
That's what he asked for.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, I thought as someone, because he was joking about, I've been called worse. And I thought, well, yes, as someone who personally, right, Matt was the target of ridiculous, vindictive, partisan bunch of nothing burgers, right? I mean, they're the ones that weaponize against, their political opponents. All of this stuff, I feel like Mueller, because he unfortunately was an institutionalist and respected the lines of, no, I'm not going to go the counterintelligence route or the follow the money, do the financial. I am building this obstruction of justice. These are 10 counts of obstruction of justice that you cannot let stand because I'll get fired if I pursue the counterintelligence or the money parts. So, obviously the money part's being pursued elsewhere, but I just feel like we have got to prosecute the original obstruction of justice, don't we?
I actually think we shouldn't, for a real technical reason, which is I think if you're going to get Donald Trump, if you're going to prosecute Donald Trump, you have to get him for some plain vanilla crime, let's say tax,
let's just make something up. Tax fraud,
insurance fraud, something like that. I think the obstruction of justice cases, you'd have to rely on, he would have defenses that relate to presidential powers. And you would get in this big legal back and forth over not over what the law is around that. And I just don't have any confidence in the Supreme Court. They've been pretty tolerant of white collar crimes and thrown out a ton of political convictions.
This is why we have to expand the court. We have to do everything all at once. We need to actually finally investigate Brett Kavanaugh and the 4,500 tips. Get that seat back. Yes.
Right. My bottom line with it is I think if you're going to prosecute Trump, you have to know you're going to win. Yeah. And I don't have a lot of confidence that we'd win. And so you can't come at him and miss.
You're not telling
me. You can't come at him and miss.
You're not telling me what I want to hear, so I'm getting rid of you now. Be gone. Goodbye. No, thank you. Thank you, Matthew Miller. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Matt.
Always enjoy it.
All right, bye. 22 minutes after.